Great Western Mining has got a new chief executive. It's Ed Loye, and he joins us now. Ed, congratulations on your appointment. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good to be here. Good to have a chat and you know, fulfill all of the questions you may have.
Yeah, so I should just mention right at the top of the conversation that I'm also a director of Great Western Mining. I sat on the board for a number of years as a non-executive, so not involved in the day-to-day like you are, but I do have a little bit of an awareness of what's been going on over there in Nevada. But in this conversation, I think we're really looking forward to hearing about what your vision is for the company, Ed. Now you've been appointed as CEO, it's serendipitous that a lot of new money has just been raised as well. So tell us about the conjunction of the new money, the new CEO, and what it means for the company.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be here. Lots to do. We're very pleased that we were able to raise 3.2 million for our exploration campaign. The company, as a lot of people know, is based in Nevada, one of the premier destinations for exploration and mining in the world. We have a few assets within the Walker Lane Belt, famous mining area, from gold, copper, and of course, a tungsten occurrence. And it's this latter tungsten occurrence that we're keen to delineate in detail, and we'll have already started to do so. What we want to show is that this deposit is analogous to quite a few other deposits in the region, and the fact that with its proven production in the past, in the 1940s, we can bring modern exploration techniques to fully delineate its extent.
I mean, the opportunity in tungsten is enticing given the recent strength in tungsten prices. What do you think about tungsten in general then, Ed? Do you think this is a metal of the future?
Well, I think there's a lot of noise about a lot of commodities at the moment in terms of them hitting these kind of really high prices. You've got APT well above 1,000 per metric ton unit. Will this sustain? I think it will. I think the previous cycles for tungsten, which of course have been security driven because of its application in defense technologies and tooling, what have you. I think tungsten, like a lot of critical materials and strategic minerals especially, there's a lot of additional end uses for them, and also a lot of applications on the horizon for it. You may have heard about the fusion reactors and the need for tungsten in the plasma-facing crucibles for these things. And of course, if that comes off, the amount of tungsten required is going to be huge. So you look at the macro, for example, for copper and how much copper needs to be mined going forwards for the electrification of everything. Same goes for tungsten. Manufacturing, defense and security, and burgeoning power generation.
So very exciting for Great Western to be part of that scene then. And of course, it's not completely new, is it? The tungsten story at Great Western. There's been a certain amount of tungsten activity on the company's ground for years.
Well, yes. Last year we did some soil sampling. Not that tungsten responds well to soils, but in terms of geological vectoring, it can be quite a useful tool. You're not going to get big numbers from soil sampling. Effectively, it's an indicative tool. It's only when you actually get into the parent rocks and drill it or trench it that you're going to get real numbers. And of course, that's why in December we were keen to get out there and show some of the surface exposures that we have can show comparable grades to our local peers. So we're keen to get out there and drill it. In the meantime, we want to do more trenching, geophysical surveys as well. So we want to be out there in May or June drilling at the latest, really. So we've been spending a lot of our time now organizing that, and we will be on the ground very soon. And I mentioned that we're going to continue to do trenching. Hopefully, we can release some additional news ahead of the drilling, because we know a lot of people are very keen to see us delineate this thing. We have indications from surface mapping that we have at least 500 meters of strike. We need to test this. We also have the potential to take this geological boundary where the skarn occurs for another 2 kilometers to link up to the pre-existing M2 resource.
Yeah, that's an exciting prospect. So if the tungsten skarn is connected to the M2 copper resource, perhaps you could outline for the non-geologists in the audience what the implications of that might be. Is there or has there been evidence of tungsten at M2, or do you think that that's something that may show in the future?
Well, let's just talk about M2 to start with. If anything, let's talk about the company's assets to begin with. So there are a few properties that the company has been tending over the last few years, whether that's looking for gold or silver or for copper. And of course, we're looking in a trend where there's granite intrusions and other igneous activity that's infiltrated the rocks and mineralized a lot of areas. Hence why the area is so the mineral county in Nevada where we are is so prolific. Now it's time for focus. To date, the only resource that the company has is the M2 copper resource at 4.5 million tons at 0.45% copper. So it's important that we have the opportunity now to get another MRE maiden mineral resource estimate on the tungsten, but just for spatial thinking, and this is important for investors and anyone else that's interested, is that we haven't dropped all these other projects and moved to a tungsten play. This tungsten play is linked to the whole system of the West Huntoon, the M2, the Black Mountains, Mineral Jackpot, all of these names that you know we've been delineating, but now we can actually bring it all together. How they're related, we need to kind of reassess this because, of course, in the past, we haven't been looking at tungsten in great detail. We know that it's there. It's known that tungsten occurs around Nevada, but the focus for the company in the past has been for copper and precious metals. So part of our reassessment will include revisiting perhaps some of the M2 skarn hosted mineralization to see how that was mineralized in tungsten. We don't know whether that was assayed correctly or assayed at all for tungsten, so we need to kind of revisit that. The other thing is we need to look at the complex geology of the area. You can have an initial tungsten skarn, for example. Shall I talk about skarns? I think we need to talk about skarns. I'm going to talk about skarns.
Yes.
Skarns are like your burnt top on a creme brulee, okay? Imagine a hot blob of rock coming through the kind of pre-existing earth. You're going to get this sort of burnt carapace where that kind of hot thing is burning the kind of the pre-existing rocks. And unlike a skinny vein that you'd get gold and silver in, these kind of burnt horizons or metamorphic aureoles, as geologists call it, can be actually quite broad. Broad is good news for mining because we're talking about appreciable widths. So you might not get some high grade, but you're going to get breadth. So in terms of mineability, open casting, for example, skarn deposits are really good for modern mining. And that's what we have at Defender. The copper at M2 is hosted in a similar kind of burnt carapace, but of course, that is having high copper and other base metal associations with a credit of gold and silver. Of course, this is similar to a lot of the analogous tungsten plays we have in the area region as well. So what you have is that a tungsten skarn is not only going to be hosting tungsten, it's got the possibility of hosting other base metals and precious metals to a varying degree because the geology is quite complex in the area. You get these things called overprinting. So you may get a porphyry, for example, some sort of like degassing hydrothermal fluids, really modifying the pre-existing skarn. So part of it may be more copper rich, some of it may be more copper deficient, but you're still going to have quite a consistent tungsten mineralization from that initial um, igneous activity. Does that make sense? Just as a
Yeah,
sort
so
of
you're
a
talking
background.
about a sort of fairly sizable footprint of mineralization across the region then.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. Again, it's about geology. It's about the type of igneous activity that you have in this region. Without going into too much detail, when you melt a granite, um, you're going to get different compositions depending on where that granite came from. Granites can be generated from tectonic activity. And of course, depending on the type of tectonic activity, you have this thing called a flat slab tectonism. You know, when you've got the two plates verging like this, right? And you've got the kind of oceanic plate going down like this, right?
Hmm.
Interestingly, in highly mineralized areas of the world, you can have this thing called flat slab tectonism, which is actually very good for generating mineral deposits. So Chile, for example, full of copper porphyries, is subject to what's called flat slab tectonism. So when the plate comes like this, instead of going deep down here, it's actually going quite flat underneath. And when it's going underneath, it start where my nails are underneath here, it starts bubbling up, and it's on this section here that you would get a lot of mineral deposits. Interestingly, a long time before Chile, in Nevada, you had a similar situation of the Pacific plate going underneath California, for example, but flattish. And of course, that pushed all the way under and created all these mineral deposits. Obviously, there's been quite a lot of modification since then because that's been replaced by extensionism and the same kind of what they call the Great Basin of Nevada. But a lot of these different geological episodes have created a lot of this mineral wealth. And of course, this is what we're trying to tap into here. But what's great is that at Defender to M2, we have quite a lot of exposure that we can test now. Unlike a lot of areas in Nevada that have a lot of recent cover, you know, well, let's just call it desert. So it's very difficult to know what's underneath it. So here, we've got an opportunity to net all of our previous year's exploration into one focused area of a good strike length, at least 2 kilometers. This initial 500-meter fence that we want to do is analogous to our regional peers that have been doing similar resource work. So we're very excited to show that we have a similar scale and grade of mineralization in terms of tungsten here.
I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when the drills get turning. How much drilling are you anticipating doing in the sort of initial run?
I think we're going to start. Obviously, it's a maiden mineral resource estimate for Defender, so we are going to drill tentatively. Obviously, we're not going to have a full cash burn of our 3.2. We want to be very careful with the spend. We know things can be expensive in North America. We don't want to be in a situation where we have to go back to the market for another raise. We know that we can get an MRE pretty economically, and that's what we want to do initially, and show that this thing really does have legs.
What kind of drilling will it be? I know that there's been RC done a lot on the Great Western Ground in the past.
Yeah. So this is very much a Nevada thing. Because of the nature of the rocks, they can be quite chossy. So to actually get good recovery from diamond can be quite difficult. So that's where RC, obviously combined with its lower price point compared to diamond, per meter or per foot, it's important that we understand the nature of the ground. It's not necessarily just economics, it's whether we can actually get good core. Thing is, because we are targeting a skarn, skarns are hard. So we should get good RQD, we should get good recovery of more solid core that we can obviously get very accurate um, grade definitions and obviously additional structural information about the deposit. So at the moment, we are determining whether we will be using diamond or RC. That's an ongoing, that's live right now. We're just deciding what would be best. And we'll come back to everyone about that. But those are the reasons why we're trying to decide.
So we can expect drilling sort of within a matter of months. And then you mentioned a maiden resource estimate for Defender. How long do you think it'll be before that's available in the public domain?
We're looking at late summer, early fall for an MRE on the tungsten.
And what will it mean once you've got that? Where do you go from there?
That's the initial port of call in terms of, flag in the sand. We have to then determine, do we want, we obviously are keen to get the right drill spacing on it. We want to get hopefully an indicated resource out of this to start with. But if it's inferred, that's fine. Obviously, there are metrics involved that will dictate that. We don't know how that will work. It's not necessarily just about drill spacing. It's about kind of what we actually get returned. We will do further exploration. We have to then step out. We'll hopefully indicate what we see at surface, depth, and then we can do step back. We can do step out. We're keen to grow what we find, and we know that it's there. We just need to do it in a methodical way. We can't just go straight out now and do a full drill out along strike. We can't do that. We need to do a very responsible first tidy fence on it, just to show that it is there. It does continue at depth in its immediate vicinity before we start testing this full strike length.
So, okay, so you mentioned that there's some work to be done before the drill bit starts turning as well. So perhaps Ed, you could just lay out what the news flow might look like for Great Western in the run up to the drilling.
Okay, this is a really good point, and we've been planning this the last few weeks as well. Is that we have the geophysics booked. What's important about the geophysics is the fact that this skarn horizon is very dense. It's a there's a large density differential between this host for the tungsten and the bounding rocks, i.e., a limestone on one side and a granite on the other. So gravity should pick out this very distinctive density differential. So we're doing that along the whole 2 kilometer strike between Defender and M2. So we'll have a good idea of the density makeup subsurface, which is going to help our geologists on surface that will be doing detailed mapping to a very fine scale. And of course, this is going to help dictate any future collar positioning, for example, or any surface trenching that we want to do. Because obviously the trenching was so successful before Christmas, we know that that's a very good initial exercise to undertake. And of course, that's going to help with the news flow as well. There's a few other exposures that we could go and saw cut tomorrow if we wanted to, which we're actually planning to do. So obviously the field season starts next month because it's all subject to snow cover, because of course we have snow or the risk of snow where we are in the mountains in Nevada. So in reality, we'll be on the ground next month, starting that mapping. We can get out there and do some more channel cuts. Of course, while we're preparing the ground for the drilling in May or June, we're also going to be setting up pads for the drilling. When you set up pads, that's also another opportunity to, while you're making the roads, you can also do some trench cuts as you're doing that. So you can maximize your ground disturbance. Obviously, we need to do all this in adherence to environmental regulation, but while we're building a road to a pad, why don't we treat that as a surface trench as well, which we're planning to do. And of course, this is all going to help with the news flow ahead of the drilling. So it's not a subject, it's not going to be the case of, oh, we have to wait months until we get assays in July or August. We're talking about the fact that we can get some additional assays from some trench work whether they're exposed now or we're going to expose them as we're doing the ground prep. That's going to help with the news flow ahead of that.
Yes, there's going to be a lot to look forward to. Now, let's just broaden the conversation out a little bit, Ed. We talked about the tungsten. We talked about the fact that there's been a recent injection of more than £3 million into the company. Is there going to be much work on any of the other Great Western projects in the meantime?
Yes, yes. And it's important we get this message across that we haven't forgotten about the other assets the company has. Obviously, the majority of this raise was for delineating the tungsten. But at the same time, we can keep the pots boiling on some of our other assets as well, which we're intending to do. And we can do that at a reasonable cost. We may not be drilling on any other sites, but there's a lot of great work that we can do off the back of the drilling we did last year. So, for example, at West Huntoon, although the drilling wasn't necessarily, you know, the most exciting results, what it did do, because you've got to remember that that was pretty kind of early doors exploration there. We didn't really know what we were going to get. Um, but obviously, a lot of that was chasing IP anomalies and some grab samples at surface. One of the positives from that was that the mineralization in terms of precious metals wasn't necessarily in the surroundings of this so-called crown point granite, but it was actually in the granite itself. So the last two drill holes we had at West Huntoon, which intersected the granite, those are the ones that came back with the gold and silver credit. So in the meantime, what we're planning to do while we're doing a lot of the setup for tungsten is that we're going to do a very detailed rock chip sampling program on West Huntoon so that we can get a better understanding of the gold and silver mineralization within that fertile granite. So we can do that. Obviously, that's going to come under assay costs and obviously a geologist's time, but that's fine. This is a good little project we can do in between setup for the drilling campaign. And again, just to put this into perspective, this is only this is about 8 to 10 miles away from where we're going to be working anyway. So this is all in the same area. Some of the mineralization drivers are related. So, you know, we're getting something done at the same time as we're setting something else up. So we're not neglecting some of our other projects. Just to reiterate, we'll be looking at West Huntoon. As for other projects, yes, M2, we're going to revisit that old resource. We're going to do a lot of desktop studies, re-assay some samples, for example, just to see whether we've got tungsten showings all the way down there, you know, beyond 2 kilometers of strike. So yeah, there's a lot of things we can do at the same time.
I mean, if you look at the company just from a very wide angled lens, it seems to have so much going for it. It's got gold, copper, silver, and tungsten, and it's in Nevada, which is one of the great mining jurisdictions in the world. I mean, presumably those are some of the factors which encouraged you to join as CEO.
Absolutely. So when I first was introduced to the company, my first trip out to Nevada was October last year. So I've not been here for long, but I've got stuck into everything. Like a lot of people, I think that visit Great Western initially, you look at their assets and you're going to go, oh, there's a lot going on here. You know, they spread themselves quite wide, which is great that there's a diversified portfolio, but it does need to change, and it is changing now in the fact that I think it was like a bit of a kids in the candy store situation in the fact that you're in Mineral County. There's all this unexplored ground in terms of applying modern geophysics or modern geological techniques, and yes, quite a few years of visiting all of these different places, some good showings, some not so good showings. Now it's time for focus. I think the wider thinking, which is all very important to think about, for example, hidden porphyries, and is there another kind of Yerrington porphyry somewhere? Is there the next Comstock around the corner? I think a lot of that thinking is calmed down now, and now we're focusing on the most prospective areas of the whole acid clutch of assets. You know, it's like it's been 10 years now since the M2 maiden resource, and now is time to at least get another MRE. And what's great, and I'll reiterate this again, is that this MRE that we're going to put together should connect to the pre-existing one. You know, again, this isn't disparate. This is combining a lot of all the hard work that's been done in the past. But now it's time for focus, and it's one of the reasons why I've been brought in. There's very much to be said for um, academic theorizing in terms of genetic models mineralization, but there's also the need to be economic, to be an economic geologist, to look at the viability of these things. It's like it's all very well and good having some high grade intercepts here, there, and everywhere, but it needs to be realistic, especially in today's world in terms of mineability. It might have been good for a kind of an old prospector revolt to chase a kind of a very thin, high grade gold vein, but in reality today, a mine with that sort of showing, you know, has to have a lot more going for it to make it viable. Because of course, if you're looking at the viability of a mine now, it's probably got to be open pitted. You know, yes, it can be underground, but it's got to be pretty high grades to justify underground development. And again, this brings it round to skarns. This is why I'm so keen on skarns, is that they're mineable widths. In terms of tungsten, you may look at other tungsten plays in the world, and they're going to be low grade. You know, you're not going to get wonder grades, but of course, this isn't, you know, 4% tungsten underneath a village in Cornwall, you know, half a kilometer down. This is, yes, lower grade, but wide, you know, multi tens of meters at surface. So if you wanted to go and mine it tomorrow, you could. You can just go and quarry it. And it's been done before. And it's got proven processing. The so-called Tempaiute process is how you would process this garnet hosted scheelite, which we have here. And of course, it's the same mineralization that we have at the analogous deposits in the region. You know, you have pervasive, albeit kind of lower grade, but over broad widths, scheelite in garnet skarn. And that's what we have.
Fantastic. So, I mean, now that you've taken on this role, Ed, and you're talking with such enthusiasm about the potential of the tungsten in association with the copper and the other wider context of the projects, where do you see Great Western heading? I mean, what would be your vision for this company, and how would you see it positioned in say 2 or 3 years' time, or even perhaps further out?
What I see, obviously, you know, focus is my thing. I think it's good having a diverse portfolio. I think it's a safe and sensible thing to have. You don't have all your eggs in one basket. So, for example, you know, you don't know where commodity prices are going. You know, you wouldn't want to just sell off everything and just put everything on tungsten. It's important that obviously we keep a lot of the different projects going. But of course, and I'll bring it back. That's what's keen about this area. Which is positive about this area is that hopefully it's polymineralic, it's polymetallic. It's not just going to be tungsten. If you can link it to M2, you're going to have multiple commodity, which is very sensible in terms of insurance going forward and you know, unreliable or kind of swaying commodity prices. We don't know what's going to happen. You've got to remember this is mining. You know, there are inherent risks in terms of kind of well, on many different levels, but the vision for the company, I think it will keep its range of assets. I think some of the assets should be JV'd and spun out. I think that would be a good look, and the fact that the company can start generating more mineral resources, so it's got more assets that are actually under code, and show that it's also a project generator at the same time. So some of its other ideas and projects can be JV or spun out to other companies. I think that will show versatility, but it will also shore up the company's finances, at least make it more attractive that it actually has more than just disparate showings here and there. It actually has some core resources. it's not just the M2, it'll have some other MREs.
Well, we look forward to watching you take the company forward, Ed, and we look forward to watching the newsflow as it begins to come out on the tungsten. In the meantime, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning, and all the best with making plans and putting them into effect.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, lots to do, but positive. It's all exciting. It's a really exciting time for the company for sure.
We look forward to watching you make it happen. Thanks very much, Ed.